Hello, everyone, and welcome to this audio podcast. This audio podcast, as part of a ZtormLabostix article. This audio podcast is part of a Siege Solar Storm. This audio podcast is part of a Stax'n'um edition. This audio podcast is part of a ZtormLabostix production. Looking at now today's audio podcast overview, looking at Haemolytic Uraemic Syndrome and some of the complications. Some of the main complications includes the arterial blood pressure arterial blood pressure, ABP. The symptomologies around acute renal failure, symptomologies where acute renal failure leads into chronic renal failure, and then additionally the challenges, if you like, the challenges around the neurological deficits, in those diagnosed with HUS, since there can be forms of ischemia, and other hematological laboratory parameters which are affected throughout the diagnoses of HUS recipients. There is evidence to indicate at the same time that most adult patients or recipients from female backgrounds, and those who take particular oral contraceptives or are postpartum or have obstetric complications, for example preeclampsia, can or are and can be affected further with and in around HUS, in around where HUS, hemolytic uremic syndrome is concerned. Again, in the literature, there is evidence to indicate some of the more pathophysiological complications in around HUS. So again, listeners and viewers are more than welcome to check out the literature, to identify and delve into more in around HUS, hemolytic uremic syndrome, and some of the pathophysiological complications and detriments that can occur in pediatrics and young people diagnosed, and also how pediatrics and young people diagnosed who do survive that some of the challenges that can occur as they transition from pediatrics into young adults and adults in context of kidney care, and in context of the hematological challenges as well. So that draws this audio podcast to a close. This audio podcast as part of a ZtormLabostix article. This audio podcast as part of a Siege Solar Storm. This audio podcast as part of a Stax'n'um edition. This audio podcast as part of a ZtormLabostix production.